Gentlemen, thanks for joining us today. This is a Prescott City Council workshop. Today is Tuesday, February the 3rd, 2015. Chris, any introductions?
Just want to welcome Sherry Hanna. Always good to see her back. She's going to be talking to us a little bit later about golf.
Okay. And we are honored today to have Pastor Ron Merrill of the Heights Church, and will lead us in the invocation, and then Councilman Blair will lead us in the pledge.
Let's pray. Gracious Heavenly Father, I can't thank you enough for the blessing of this city that we live in. And you've given us a wonderful place to live. And thank you so much, God, too, for these city servants, for our mayor, the councilmen and women that sit here today that you have put in place, and the concerned citizens that are here in this room today. We ask that you would bless this meeting, the discussion time, that you'd grant wisdom and humility to this place today. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call.
Mayor Kirkendall.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Kuknio.
Here.
Councilman Arnold.
Here.
Councilman Blair.
Here.
Councilman Lamerson.
Here.
Councilman Lazell.
Here.
Councilwoman Wilcox.
Here.
All present.
Any announcements to the public? Okay. We'll go straight on to proclamations, and Councilman Charlie has volunteered to do the proclamation on teen dating.
And is there anyone here to accept this proclamation?
And we have, yes, we have somebody here. Good.
They're not teens, Charlie.
Thank you for being here. Okay.
Come on up. Thank you very much. Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month, February 2015. Whereas the youth of Prescott are this city's most precious resource and great hope for the future, and ensuring their safety, well-being, positive development, and growth into healthy citizens is a priority and responsibility we all share. And whereas the transitional adolescent years present new challenges and choices for teens as they experience dating relationships for the first time, and whereas teen dating violence, including physical, verbal, and emotional abuse, sexual assault, and harassment via texting, email, or instant messaging is a reality for many teenagers, as it is a reality of which many parents and caregivers are unaware. And whereas studies also indicate that effects of violent relationships can be serious and put victims at higher risk for substance abuse, eating disorders, risky sexual behavior, suicide, and adult re-victimization. And whereas both houses of the U.S. Congress have declared February as National Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. Now, therefore, Marlon Kirkendall, Mayor of the City of Prescott, does hereby recognize February 2015 as Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month. Would you like to share anything about Teen Dating Violence Awareness and Prevention Month?
Michelle's on the committee for the CCRT, the committee that we all work together with. I teach through the Yavapai County Community Health Services, and it's a great honor for you to be aware of this. We thank you so much, Chief. We thank you so much. We thank you, Councilman, for understanding this, and we are teaching the next generation, just like Prescott High School.
Wonderful. Go ahead if you have anything to add.
Again, I just want to thank the council, mayor, for acknowledging this and understanding the importance of teaching our youth what healthy relationships are so we can prevent intimate partner violence in the future. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving along. Our first presentation is from the Chamber of Commerce. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, Council, good afternoon. My name is Neil Sneller, and I'm the Membership Director for the Prescott Chamber. Last Thursday, the Chamber hosted our annual meeting, and we had over 200 people attend. We recognize 16 area businesses who are honored as recipients of the Healthy Prescott Business Awards. Thank you to everyone to help make the event a huge success. Next Wednesday, February 11, we're hosting the Women in Business Quarterly Luncheon, and we're honored to have Elizabeth Ruffner be our guest speaker. If you're interested in attending, please visit prescott.org to register. The Prescott Chamber continues to grow. Here's a list of our new members. American Towing of Prescott, CC and Company Adventures, Earthworks Landscape and Supply, Framers Market and Gallery, Freedom Recovery Center, John Hancock Barbershop, Legacy Roofing, Mogi's Grill, Sally's Barbecue and Taste Buds Pizza, Verde River Basin Partnership, and finally, Wellspring Massage Therapy. Thank you.
Having a good year?
Yes, sir. Off to a good start.
Great. You're doing a good job.
Appreciate it.
Thanks for being here.
Thank you all.
Okay, next we have a presentation by North Point Expeditionary Learning Academy. Thank you for being here. Okay. Bill, are you the chaperone?
Yes, I am.
Very good. Are you chaperoning him? That would be my question. Yeah.
You know, Bill gets killed in Mexico every year.
Yeah.
It's all a play, but still.
Right. So good afternoon, and
Good afternoon.
thank you to the council for this opportunity to share our experiences with you during our trip to Suchitoto, El Salvador. My name's Kyle Short. I'm the current Spanish instructor at North Point Expeditionary Learning Academy. Last year was my first year at the school and here in Prescott, and it was a great surprise and challenge for me to learn that I would be leading an international trip. Luckily, like you said, I had Mr. McKella chaperoning with me and chaperoning me as well. It was a great experience. Probably our biggest hurdle was fundraising all the money. Our goal was to have the students pay about half out of pocket and fundraise the other half, which was a challenge for us all year. We were pretty successful though. We almost made it. I think they just had to pay a little bit over half. Besides that, the trip was a huge success. Being an expeditionary learning school, we always have a focus during our trips like this. This focus on our particular trip was the history and culture of El Salvador, specifically surrounded around the recent civil war they had that only ended in 1992. That's what most of our visits. There's Sister Peggy right there. She is a nun from New Jersey who runs a center called the Center for Arts and Peace. That's where we stayed for the majority of our time in Suchitoto. That's also the jump-off point for a lot of our trips. The trips we did do were focused around either history lessons or cultural exchange. You can see here we're with a few of the residents at a local community, a very rural community. This is actually our service trip right here that I'll get to in a second. We had jungle hikes, you can see there, an overnight stay in that same rural community, a visit to the capital, San Salvador, and a good time at the beach to finish it off. But what I really want to talk to you about is our service. We only had 2 days of it. One was more cultural exchange than service, but there was a school called Los Almendros. It's from K to 12, so it was a good opportunity for our high school students to interact with both kids their own age and younger as well. We spent the first day playing a soccer game, showed them how to play ultimate frisbee, a favorite at our school, and the second day we were able to monetarily provide them with new desks and paint, as you can see right there, to cover the cracked and peeling paint on their walls, and we spent the day painting with the students that actually go to that school. It was a really positive experience as well. I'm looking forward to planning another trip next year, next school year, that's even better than the last. Today I have with me 2 students who are on the trip, Mr. William Lemaster and Miss Emily Anders, and I'd like to give them a moment to share their experience with you.
Hi, thank you. First of all, I just want to say this was a great opportunity, the best school trip I've ever been on. And thank you to Mr. Short and Mr. Mencken for, Ms. Zyke also. I was first interested in this trip because as a profession, I want to pursue teaching Spanish or English to Spanish speakers. Previously, I had been on a trip to Germany, and the communication there was pretty lacking as I spoke pretty much zero German words. This one was definitely a step up. It was like one big family as soon as we landed in Suchitoto. We spoke minimal Spanish, and they spoke minimal English, but it really was just, it was like one big family, and they were really accepting of us. Our service work was really excellent. We got to paint their school, as you saw up there, and help them move their desks in. And yeah, it was great to connect with these kids our own age, just kind of build relationships, even without using words, just their smiles, their homemade food that they were offering to us. It was really just exceptional, and thank you.
So my initial intentions at going to El Salvador were a little less noble. I went there so that I could put another thing on a college resume. But it did actually soon become a major kind of focus point for my year. I remember spending the first 3 weeks asking Short, so we're going to see Mayan ruins, right? Right? And then, of course, I have a personality to where I want to learn about the economics and the social situations that all these are in. So I started asking the people from there, so what's your local infrastructure like? But I think one of the biggest highlights about this trip for me was just the ability to see all these people. I think that a lot of times we have a false perceptions of nations like this where we're all just kind of picturing them as so skinny you can see all their ribs and just wandering around a dirt patch and all that. And while there's a lot of poverty in those places, these are people too who are enjoying their lives and making the most of it. And you could see that when we just went to some of the local communities there. They were partying and dancing, and you could see that even when we were doing service there, is when we taught them ultimate frisbee for the first time, they caught it like that. So much so that we had to really sweat just to win one game. In our defense, we only played one game, but but yeah, so that was by far the biggest highlight for me, is just getting that real world connection of these are people and they have great parts in their lives and they have burdens in their lives too, just like the rest of us, I'm sure. Right.
My name is Bill McKella, and I have been involved with the Sister City program in Prescott for quite some time. I have just recently been elected to be chairman of the Prescott Caborca Sister City Committee. And I've been to Suchitoto with the North Point group twice as kind of point person and making some arrangements, and then being there with and for them during the whole time. If you don't know, our relationship as Sister City with Suchitoto, El Salvador, has been rather dormant since about the last trip we took. Allison Zyke from North Point and I are working to revive that committee, and we hope by this summer to have an active Suchitoto, El Salvador, and Prescott Sister City Committee up and going again. El Salvador, the reason you saw the guns in front of that cemetery is El Salvador is 22 years out of civil war. So much of what we do beyond the service project is visiting sites that are war sites and learning about the culture and how kids are surviving and families are surviving in the post-Civil War culture in El Salvador. And so our students interact with students who are first-generation survivors of that Civil War. And so many of the sites that we visit have to do with those battle histories, and it provides an interaction at a point where those kids are living. So it's always an exciting journey to go to El Salvador, and we look forward to more work with them.
Question, Bill.
Yes.
Prescott Park.
Yes, we don't have a picture of it here. We did visit Prescott Park, and it is completely functional with playground equipment, and the tiles that our students made and sent down are on a little wall there, and it is up and running, and we were there visiting. It is in good shape.
Wonderful. Those that don't know, 4 years ago, 3 years ago,
2010.
that you drove the ambulance. now.
Yes.
Yeah. Lifeline Ambulance donated an ambulance, and Bill and Bob
Greninger, yes.
the Bill and Bob team
Yes.
drove the ambulance all the way to El Salvador.
We drove from Prescott to El Salvador, a 15-day trip, and delivered the ambulance that was donated by Lifeline, and Marlon was very helpful in getting that all to work. And it was, I don't know if all of you know the history, but the mayor at that time was Juan Javier Martinez, who is now the person in charge of national security for El Salvador. The first person to need that ambulance was his father. Less than 2 weeks after we delivered it, his father had a heart attack and was taken to San Salvador in the ambulance and survived. Prior to our delivering that ambulance, if somebody needed to go to a hospital, it was an hour and a half, 2 hours away to San Salvador in the back of a pickup truck. When we delivered the ambulance, people were crying at being so happy for having an ambulance in town for the first time. So thank you for the assistance and for your moral support in our delivering that ambulance in 2010. And these trips have followed on those heels, and if you want to talk to any students that went individually, you will find that
Great.
they loved it. So,
Well, thanks for y'all coming by. We
any other
appreciate
questions for me?
Anybody? Bill?
Yeah, I do, actually, and the kids might be able to answer this. I think anything that, when Sister Cities is successful, it's because the youth really pick up that ball and run with it. I know Zeitz has had a lot of measure of success because of social media. Do they have access in Suchitoto to any of those kind of things, the Facebooks, so they do?
Yeah, we are posting the majority of the time, especially in Suchitoto. We did have access to Wi-Fi on our mobile devices, as well as, I think, a hotel in San Salvador. Not so much in the last part, but pretty much the whole time we were posting pictures and videos and statuses.
Well, yeah, thank you very much. Good luck, you guys.
Anyone else?
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to really thank North Point for taking the lead on keeping that relationship with Suchitoto alive. It's an important sister city relationship that we need to grow and cultivate. And with young people like you and instructors and institution and Bob and Bill show, I think it's going to happen. I'm very supportive of it.
Okay. Thanks again. Okay. You're welcome to spend the afternoon. We should be out of here by 7:30.
We're playing Tri-City tonight.
Okay. He disappeared. Oh, we thought you'd left.
You waiting for me to say something? I was just going.
Oh, no. Stay with us.
I have to get the kids
Oh,
back
okay.
before the end of the school day.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it. Okay, now we're honored to have Sherry Hanna with us, and she's going to tell us about the John E. Hanna Senior Memorial Golf Tournament. Sherry, thanks for being here.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Kirkendall and Council. It's a pleasure to be here. And before I start, I want to say that when this ambulance program was going on, Johnny was on council, and we attended several of the functions when they were preparing to get the ambulance, and I'm so glad to see that that was accomplished and what a difference it's made, because that was a big deal to those people, and they were so excited. So
thank you.
That's really nice that I'm here to see that accomplishment. Today, I am here to talk about the Guns and Hoses John Hanna Senior Memorial Golf Tournament. And to give you a little history, my late husband, John, was a retired Prescott police officer and a former member of this council, and passed away in October of 2013 after nearly a 2-year battle with cancer. And passed away suddenly, so it was, quite a shock. But after time passed, people started calling me and stopping me on the street or in the store and saying, we really need to do something for Johnny and his service and as a police officer and on the council, and to remember him. And I thought about it, and I thought, okay, we probably should. And then I called Mac McCarley, who was the golf pro at the golf course, and told him, what I was thinking about doing. And he said, Sherry, I'm way ahead of you. I've had so many people out here come to me and say the same thing. We need to do something for Johnny. So if you'll come out, I'll meet with you, and I'll tell you what I think, would be a good plan. So I met with Mac McCarley, and he came up with the name, the Guns and Hoses, in honor of the police and firemen, and said, let's have this golf tournament that supports the police and fire. And he pretty much had everything already taken care of. So I agreed, and I said the one condition, all the proceeds would go to the Prescott Firefighter Charities and the Prescott Police Explorer Program. So that was the agreement we had. And then we decided, well, we better move fast. So we looked at the calendar. The only date that pretty much was available was Labor Day Saturday. That was coming up. And we decided to put together a committee. And on the committee, we had Mac McCarley, myself, Lieutenant Tim Fletcher from the Prescott PD, Dan Hutchison, who represented the Prescott Firefighter Charities, Joe Baines from the city, and Mr. Farrell from Antelope Hills, Tom Lilly and Jerry Watson from Antelope Hills, and our youngest son, Jake, who's a Sedona fireman. And I can't say enough about the committee and Mr. Farrell and Mr. Lilly and Mr. Watson at Antelope Hills. Having never put on a golf tournament before, I told them what I hoped to accomplish, and they took me by the hand and walked me through it, and our whole committee, we came together, and it was just amazing what we got done in the short amount of time that we had. And I think it's just a credit to the committee that we had. And we went out and was put on the PHS website, and committee members went around town and approached business owners about whole sponsorships or donating things for the raffle that we were going to have. And Mr. Lamerson was one of the many merchants that stepped right up and donated a beautiful necklace from Lamerson's Jewelry. And I have to say that when our committee met, everyone said that wherever they went and told them what they were doing, nobody turned them down. Everybody was so cooperative. So I think once again, the people of Prescott and Yavapai County have just shown their love to me and my family through this golf tournament, and everything that the people of Prescott and Yavapai County did to make it a success. So we have quite a different range of people. We had retired firefighters and active firefighters, retired policemen, retired sheriff deputies, DPS, and active law enforcement. Like I said, PHS alumni from 1960 all the way through to when our children graduated. Friends of our children came back and played, and Embry-Riddle students and people, teachers from Embry-Riddle, and friends, longtime friends, members of the golf community came to play for Johnny, and I think it's just a testament to the community that everybody came out, and we actually sold out the tournament. We actually had to turn teams away. So this year we have decided to start a little early and have set the date for this September, Saturday 5th, September 5th. It's the Labor Day Saturday, and I do have a little save the date for the council members, if you pass them out. And we'll be putting together a committee here in the near future and start a little early so that we can hopefully sell out the whole golf course. We just used the North Courts last year, and so hopefully this year we'll be able to sell out the whole golf course. And at the end of the tournament, after the carts and the green fees and the luncheons, we raised over $9,000 that were to be split between the Prescott Firefighter Charities and the Prescott Police Explorers. And the Prescott Firefighter Charities uses this money for their burn camp, and the Prescott Police Explorers are going to be competing in a tactical competition in June in Las Vegas, June of 2015, so they'll be able to go to that. And I think it's very important to encourage our young people to pursue a career in law enforcement. It's a chosen profession, and it's an honorable profession. And by donating this money to them, it will help them build character when they go to these competitions and see what it's like to be law enforcement. So I want to thank you for the time, and thank everybody that was so helpful to me in accomplishing this, and I look forward to having another great tournament. And even if you want to put a team together, that's great, but if you're not a golfer, if you just want to come out and be with everybody, I know you'll know a lot of people out there, and it'll be a fun time and a time to remember Johnny and support our firefighters and our law enforcement. Thank you.
Thank you, Sherry. Okay. Library presentation.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, for asking us over today to present a little bit about the library. This presentation grew out of a visit that Councilman Arnold made to the library a few weeks ago. One of the things we presented to him there was information about our online resources, and he requested that. He requested that we present that information to the council to make it more widely known. Katie Copenhaver is one of our adult services librarians. You'll often see Katie behind the Ask a Librarian desk. She also generates and presents most of our technology programming. And I've asked her to actually do the presentation because, frankly, she knows more about the databases than I do. So I'll be glad to answer any questions after Katie's presentation.
Thank you, Roger, and thank you, Mayor and Council, for your time this afternoon. I greatly appreciate it. In addition to the variety of services that we offer at the downtown location, we have a website that is filled with resources that also meet community needs. Today I'll be giving a description of a sampling of these offerings, and it's my hope that they will demonstrate how libraries and technology can certainly complement one another. And I also hope that it gives you a little bit of a glimpse of what it's like to be a librarian at Prescott Public Library, what it's like to connect with community members, and to provide a number of different resources to meet their needs. The next slide shows a clip from our website. To access these resources, you would go to prescottlibrary.info. There are 2 links that say research. If you click either link, you'll be taken to an alphabetical list of these resources. With many of these sources, patrons can access them from outside the library on any computer, tablet, or smartphone. During the fiscal year of 2014, our website received quite a bit of traffic. We tracked around 44,000 website visits during that year.
Wow.
Quite a few patrons come into the library seeking auto repair information. I certainly don't spend much time beneath the hood of my own Honda Accord. And so when a patron comes in, if they were to ask for the information on the fuel lines of their 1989 Cutlass Supreme, thank goodness I have the Chilton Library. With the Chilton Library, you can put in the year, make, and model of any vehicle and receive all of the accurate repair information for it. A particular auto repair shop in Prescott has been very vocal about their support of this resource as it helps them maintain their small business. Related to that, we also have the Small Engine Repair Reference Center. You can do the exact same thing for anything like a motorcycle, a lawnmower, even a jet ski. So as an example, if my own husband was wanting to find the wiring diagram for his 2011 Harley-Davidson XL 1200X Sportster 48, I hope I did that right, dear, even I would be able to quickly access the wiring diagram with a couple clicks of a mouse within the Chilton Library. We live in a community of avid readers. In January of this year, our library checked out 62,000 items on average for an average of 2,014 items checked out per day. Walking into our library, it can be challenging trying to decide what particular book to check out. With Novelist, a patron can put in a title, author, series, or subject and receive a list of recommended titles to read. Next Reads is fairly similar. Patrons can sign up for emailed newsletters. They choose their favorite genres, and on a monthly or bi-monthly basis, they're able to receive a newsletter with those titles. Several Saturdays ago, a patron called me when I was working, and he was about to head up to the mall to purchase a washing machine. But he had a vague recollection of the library providing some type of access to Consumer Reports. Before heading up to the mall, he was able to come to the library, and I trained him on how he could access Consumer Reports through our website. It's easy to search for a particular product. If you know the particular publication date, you can also find that fairly quickly. And the slide shows an example of the helpful chart if you were interested in a washing machine. It's very common for patrons to ask us about Consumer Reports, and we're happy to provide training on how they can pull those up through our website. Overdrive is one of our most popular resources. With Overdrive, patrons can download audiobooks and ebooks to their own computer, tablet, or smartphone. Between 2011 and 2014, we witnessed a 57% increase in items checked out through Overdrive. A natural question might be, well, if people can download from the internet, are they still coming to their local library? And the answer is yes. An average of 39,000 people walked into our building during 2014, and that breaks down to about 1,826 people in the building per day. So people are still certainly visiting our library for a number of reasons, but with Overdrive, we're happy to provide these downloadable items. We also provide access to Zinio. With Zinio, you're able to download electronic magazines, and these include popular titles such as Newsweek, Parenting, PC Magazine, and Prevention. Because these resources take a little bit of practice, we're happy to provide e-reader mentor sessions. Patrons can sign up for a private session where they bring in their own device, and we'll train them on these resources. We also have a newer program called Appy Hour. Appy Hour is a monthly program where we highlight fun and free apps that someone can put on their tablet or smartphone. And if you're needing to start at the basics, we do offer basic computer classes. These are consistently filled. Will help patrons become more comfortable using a mouse, using a keyboard, explaining internet searches. And so we're happy to provide a number of different skill trainings on a number of different skill levels. Filling out legal paperwork is a reality that we all have to deal with. And with our vicinity to the downtown courthouse, we oftentimes receive questions by patrons who need to find particular legal forms. With Gale Legal Forms, you're able to find printable forms on a number of different legal topics. It also includes an attorney directory. Several months ago, I had a patron call and she wanted to find attorneys in the Prescott area that specialized in copyright regulation. And with this research assistant, I was able to quickly pull up some names for her. And it also includes a legal definitions dictionary. If you're looking for some information on previous court cases, the Gale Legal Forms resource can certainly help you with that. Genealogy is such a popular topic. I think it resonates with each of us. We're all naturally curious about our ancestors and the stories their lives contained. For that reason, we have 3 different resources related to genealogy. With our access to Ancestry.com, that is an exception of a resource that you have to be inside of the library in order to use. As long as you're on a library computer or connected to our Wi-Fi, you're able to pull up quite a bit of information within Ancestry.com, such as census and vital records, immigration records. With Gale Genealogy Connect, we are also able to provide ebooks on a number of different genealogy topics. And Heritage Quest provides extended information on something like the Revolutionary War pension and the Freedmen's Bank record. Because genealogy is a topic that many of our patrons are passionate about, we're happy to provide genealogy mentors from the Northern Arizona Genealogical Society. You're able to set up a private appointment with a mentor who will walk through these resources with you in terms of your own family history, and those are always very popular. As an example, from the Ancestry access that we provide, I was able to find the 1940 federal census for my own great-grandfather, Robert McGrath, who lived in Oxnard, California. The slide shows you that census listing, which includes my grandmother, Mary Ellen. Quite a few patrons come into the library seeking information to help them with their international travels. It certainly makes sense to check out a library item if you're planning a trip, since you really only need that item when you're planning and possibly when you're on the road. Whenever we work with patrons who are planning their international travel, we always include information about the Global Road Warrior. With this resource, patrons can find travel information on over 175 countries. So if you were planning a trip to Italy, you'd be able to find out the correct immunizations, transit information, how appropriate it is to tip a cab driver, and so forth. Whenever you put in a particular country, you'll receive the blue menu that's on the slide with all of the different categories to click in for that location. We see quite a few job seekers at the library. These days, it's becoming so popular to have to use a computer in order to find a job, whether it's filling out an online job application or finding job listings or creating a resume. We're very happy to provide several resources related to job seeking. Career Transitions is one of my personal favorites. It includes a resume builder, which will walk a patron through the process of writing a resume. Just several weeks ago, I helped a local veteran with the resume builder. He was very highly skilled, highly trained in warehouse and forklifting, but he hadn't used a computer very much. But with the resume builder, after about an hour and a half of his time, he was able to leave the library with a fully formatted resume in the Word document program. The Testing and Education Reference Center is also one of our most popular choices. It includes powerful test prep tools for all of the popular tests that students have to take, such as the SAT, ACT, even the GED. I certainly wish I had had access to this when I was a student. With it, you're able to take practice tests, you're able to click through slides and quick quizzes, and even gain information about the test itself. Related to job seekers, we always promote this resource when we hear that someone's preparing for the tests that are required for firefighting, law enforcement, real estate workers, and even military professionals. It's always nice for them to leave the library with several books checked out, but with this resource, they're able to take several practice tests so that they can improve their chances towards these careers. And because job seekers really need extra help, we provide several job stations on the main level that are specifically close to the Ask Librarian desk so that we can quickly reach them when they have questions. If they're looking for a bit of extended help, we also have the Job Help Hub program. This is on every Tuesday from 10 to noon. Job seekers can use our upper level training lab with provided assistance. The example of the veteran that I gave who was using the resume builder, he came to the Job Help Hub that day. I've used the word research several times in my presentation. Perhaps there's no better group that understands research than our local investors. Our local investors are always curious about market fluctuations. They're consistently trying to find new information to keep their portfolios strong. And for that reason, we provide access to two trusted names within investment research, Morningstar and Value Line. Loosely related to this, we also have a library program, the Financial Education Series. The Society of Financial Awareness comes up from Phoenix once a month, and they give a free talk on a financial topic. These are always well attended, and some examples of upcoming talks are the basic tax planning for retirement, and then crash proofing your retirement portfolio. As our world is becoming more interconnected, it's becoming more popular to learn a foreign language. With our Mango language program, patrons can access foreign language courses. These lessons are very interactive. They'll be watching videos, clicking on slides, taking online quizzes. There's even a way to test your own pronunciation. And this program includes a mobile app. If patrons are wanting to use our access of Mango, they can download an app onto their device, and they can take the lessons with them on the go without having to have even an internet connection. And related to foreign language help, we do have a conversational Spanish group that's been meeting at the library for several years. And in several weeks, we'll have a conversational English group starting up in several weeks on Saturdays to help our local Spanish speakers practice their English. Tutor.com is a resource that's promoted quite a bit by our youth librarians. With Tutor.com, you're able to connect with a tutor in a live chat session. These sessions are available during certain hours of the day. Obviously, the most common question would be, well, will this program help my student complete their homework? And the answer is they will never give the student the exact answer. The tutors are very trained in walking the students through examples, but they'll always make them arrive at their own conclusion. With Tutor.com, it's very useful for students, but also adults. Adults can use it if they're taking a class as high as statistics. And there's even a place where you can upload a resume and receive feedback within 24 hours from a resume professional. And Tutor.com also includes an app so that you'd be able to use it on your own tablet or smartphone. And for the last slide that I have, Universal Class. With Universal Class, you're able to take online self-paced courses. You can see from the slide that the courses range from the very fun and frivolous to the professional and serious. If someone has just been recently married, we always suggest that they take the negotiation skills through Universal Class. But on a more serious note, just last weekend when I was working, a woman came to the library and was seeking information on paralegal terminology. She was trying to become a paralegal and was needing to brush up on some of the definitions. So in addition to having her check out some items, we were able to point her towards Universal Class, and she was very enthusiastic to find out about their legal terminology course. With Universal Class, you're assigned an actual instructor, you'll receive real assignments, and you correspond through the Universal Class system itself. You're not able to get college credit for Universal Class, but several professions such as teaching require continuing education units, and we have heard of several local teachers being able to check off those boxes for their required units because of Universal Class. It's up to the discretion of the institution. But that completes the presentation I had prepared for you this afternoon. We would certainly welcome any of you to come to the library. We'd be happy to facilitate a tour. Happy for you to meet some of our other staff members and to see these services in action.
Yeah, I just had a question, and maybe you said this right at the beginning, but do you need a library card to access this, or how do you access it?
You do need a library card to access some of the databases. Others are available by putting in an Arizona state zip code. It just depends on what the funding source is.
I see.
And we'd be happy to provide a breakdown of the different databases and who they're funded by. That's required.
A lot of our databases are funded by the state or by the county, with the state databases that are available to any resident of Arizona. So you can put in,
Okay, Charlie.
Yep. I'd just like to thank you both for taking the time to be here. The tour was informative. You know, I've always thought more of a library as bricks and mortar, and going through that process, the opportunity to see some of these other things that you all provide. And there's one website that I've actually been back to the library a couple of times to visit, and that's the Foundation Center. If you could just explain briefly what that is about, so that we've got a lot of folks in town that are parts of nonprofits and raise money for different groups, and that's a resource that I think is extremely valuable.
Certainly. Thank you, Councilman Arnold. With the Foundation Center, you're able to search for funding sources if you need it as an individual or as a nonprofit. If you have funds that you're wanting to pour back into the community, there's also a way to find out who's asking for funding. And it's filled with quite a few forms and resources and suggestions on any of those goals. Because the database is so extensive and because there's so much information involved in it, usually every 3 or 4 months, one of our adult services librarians will provide an event that includes training on it, and you're able to kind of target exactly what you want to get out of it if you attend that training.
It sounds like we're getting a lot of value for the money we spend. Could you explain what this does actually cost a city? I know, Roger, you were just saying that some of this comes from the state, but how much of it is paid for by the city?
actually we don't, as a city, pay for a lot of databases anymore. Most of them are paid for either through the state or through the Yavapai County Free Library District. I'm sorry. So as I said, the state pays for a good deal of these databases, and the Yavapai County Free Library District pays for many more. We have continued to pay for some of those, such as the investment databases, the car repair databases that were popular with our patrons, but weren't in those ones that were picked up. So it's all based on population size, usually by database. And I'm sorry I don't have the amount here, but I can provide you that information if you'd like it.
I guess the long and short of it is, if we didn't have this library, we wouldn't have that open door to all those resources.
No, and as Katie said, a lot of the feedback that we get is people come in and really having to have that information, and it's being used by some of our small businesses, some people who are needing legal forms and that type of thing. So it really is beneficial to the community at large.
Anyone else? Chris? Nothing? Over here? Greg?
No.
Okay. Okay, thanks very much for taking the time this afternoon.
If any of the other council members would like a personalized tour, get in touch with Katie or me, and we'd be glad to provide that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. You going to be able to talk with your arm in a sling?
I'll do my best.
Okay. Fiscal year mid.
Here's where it's scary.
Item 1B, presentation of the mid-fiscal year 2015 budget report and a first look at fiscal year 2016.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Today we're going to go through the mid-year budget report and just to explain a little bit about how the budget's managed here at the city. Obviously, we go through an extensive budget process, which we're starting with this each year. Then during the year, the departments, the divisions, and the budget department all review the budget on a regular basis to make sure everything is going the way planned. If things aren't going the way they're planned, we make adjustments, we do things. This is more of a high-level review of the budget as a whole for you guys and for the public. If any more detail in any area is wanted by council, anytime, of course, during the year, they can always let me know, and we'd be glad to get that detail. Looking at our overall budget for 2015, we had a $170 million budget. About $80 million of that is related to operations. So the $90 million is capital, varies greatly. A lot of that capital probably won't happen this year. Projects get delayed, that type of stuff. As you can see, at 50% of the year done, our operating budget is at about 45%, which is a good point. Obviously, we had some money in there for raises this year that was done halfway through the year, so that explains why the first half of the year is a little less than 50% on the spent side. Looking at the city budget as a whole, where is it spent between enterprise? And again, just as full clarification, enterprise is our business type functions where we charge a service, we charge a fee for a service that we provide, compared to our governmental funds where the revenues are not really related at all to the expenses or the need for expenses. So this year, unlike previous years, we're about split right down the middle with enterprise and governmental of the total city budget, about 50-50. Looking at the general fund, and we talked extensively last week with the legislative delegation about the general fund. We talk a lot about the general fund. General fund is where we do a lot of the community functions. This pie chart looks at the operating budget, and I think it was Councilman Arnold who said it at our Friday meeting, that public safety portion of this pie just keeps growing and growing, 2%, 3% each year. It gets bigger and bigger. Right now we're at 71. We'll talk a little bit later about why that keeps growing and why you're going to see that grow again, unfortunately, in the 2016 budget. But the majority of our budget in our general fund is public safety. Library, which we just saw a lovely presentation on, 7%, Parks and Rec, 10%. The rest of the funds in the general fund are kind of legislative mandated with the development services. They have fees for their building permits and those type of things. The rodeo and parking garage, of course, isn't, but it's a very small part of the general fund. Budget finance, of course, deals with compliance, and then, of course, general government, which includes legal and court and all those type of things, and, of course, economic enterprises. Looking individually at those individual operating functions, you can see everybody's pretty much within the underneath the 50% mark. The only exception is kind of our rodeo and our parking garage, and that's related to some work that was done out there in the first part of the year to do some conversion of lighting and some other repairs that needed to be done. So nothing here to really worry about. All operating within the expected parameters on the operating budget. And again, capital, those projects, timing on those projects is dependent on so many things. It would really be unusual to see those at 50% of the year. And as you can see, they're only at 6%. I'd like to spend a little more time on this than we usually do for general fund revenues. Again, this is how we fund those critical services to our citizens. This is the only funding we have for those critical services, so I'd like to just look at a few of them in more detail. Obviously, the sales tax is the 1% sales tax that we have. That's allowed by our charter. That's all this $13.8 million is that 1% sales tax and use tax. The franchise tax is on our franchise operations, and property tax at 1.5 is an important part of our revenue, but it's a very small part of our revenue, and it's statutorily by the Constitution limited to that amount. It can increase 2% each year if we go through the truth in taxation function, which we've done the last 2 years, which require the roll call vote and all that. It can also increase for any annexations or new construction. But again, that's kind of limited. There's no way to increase any of those revenues on the top of the screen here with anything but a vote of the people. And even the property tax cannot be increased by a vote. Sales tax would be the only one. Under intergovernmental, we have the three big ones from the state, the city's share of the state sales tax, income tax, and the vehicle license tax. Significant portion of our revenue come from those things. Those are set up by state law. The legislature sometimes looks at changing the percentage of allocation. We have some of that this year in the governor's budget. We'll talk about it a little bit later.
Do you want questions as we go along,
Sure.
or do you want to finish?
No, if you have questions, feel free to interrupt me.
You said something there just a few minutes ago when you were talking about the limitations on revenue and income and what have you, that by statute we can't change certain things. Did I hear you correctly?
Correct. You can only change on the, looking at the tax section, this, the only thing that can really be changed is the privilege and use tax, and that can only be changed by taking a ballot issue to the voters of Prescott.
Okay, and therefore when your expenditures go up and you are by statute limited as to what you can do to generate revenue to address those expenditure increases, we need to go to the public and clarify to the public, here's one of the reasons why we're asking you to approve certain types of expenditures or mechanisms that are necessary to cover the cost of certain expenditures. And I think that's always important to expound on that as we go through this budgetary process, because there are things that are just outside of the control of the city council. They're just things that we have to deal with.
It's very accurate, Councilman.
Thank you.
Thank you for clarifying that. Again, state shared revenues, we're going to talk about the governor's budget and the effects of some of the things he has on that a little later. Our joint dispatch, of course, is related to the regional dispatch center. The library district, of course, is funding from our library district, which is based on a formula that helps cover the cost of that library.
Question.
Yes, sir.
Library district. How much money is being taken on the property tax in the county from the library district and then reallocated, given back to the city?
So your question relates to the total amount of library district tax paid by residents of Prescott or of the county as a whole?
Well, by the city of Prescott. What my concern is, and it always has been, is with the county, and I'll just air it out right here. We have a huge property evaluation in the city of Prescott. Based upon being a partner in the library district, we are taking money from the taxpayers through the county library district on your property tax, and we're being taken and being given back at a percentage which is much less than what's being taken. And we're showing this as a positive, or in my mind, a positive.
Well, it's definitely a revenue. It's definitely a positive, but I believe you're right, Councilman, in that more money is collected by the county in the city limits of the library district. The formula is based on several things more than just that component. It's I can get you the details of the formula.
I understand the formula,
Okay.
and I understand how antiquated it is and how frustrating it is to have people tell me that's just the way it is, because that's not the way it should be. I mean, I appreciate all the things the library provides to the community, but we're providing it based upon a high percentage of our property tax in the city because of the valuation and getting very little back, where we're funding Alden's library and Black Canyon City's library and all these other things. It seems like we're just redistributing those things when we're struggling enough in our own budget to keep the library open here, and it's aggravating to me.
Yes. The fire contract relates to a contract we have with the Yavapai Prescott Indian Tribe for providing fire service on the tribal lands. The other items are a relatively small part, although all parts are very important, of the budget, which includes our service charges, which includes all rents, league payments, parking fees, and all those type of things, which is other significant thing. Again, a lot of our revenue structure, especially significant components of it, as Councilman Lamerson pointed out, are not really at the council's discretion to increase. They are dependent, again, sales tax on taking an item to the voters if that needs to be increased. Moving on to another governmental fund, our Streets and Open Space Fund, which is funded by the 1% street tax approved by the voters. That, again, will be going to 0.75% tax as of January 1st of 16, coming up here about a year away. We have some reimbursement partnershiping money that comes from the county flood control district generally, and it's tied directly to capital projects. As those capital projects are done, those revenues are received. We have our HERF revenues, which again was talked about on Friday with the legislators and as part of the governor's budget, dealing with our portion of the gas tax that's returned to us.
Again, Mark, sorry to interrupt, but could you give me the number from the county flood district again on the property tax?
Sure.
What portion they're taking from the city of Prescott residents and what portion we're getting back?
We'll get those numbers for you.
Those two numbers on the library and the flood district.
And what portion we're requesting? Because that is a request based for the flood district.
It's request based on the projects we have that are eligible.
Mark, on the 1% open streets and open space tax, we had budgeted anticipating receiving $13,220,000, and we've actually received $6,919,000 some. In other words, 52% of what we had budgeted. Is there any reason to believe that that trend won't continue so that we will receive more than we actually budgeted?
This year, yes, there is reason to believe that trend will not continue because, as you know, the state TPT simplification legislation that went through along with the consolidation, which is delayed a year, but the simplification of the change in construction tax went into effect January 1. So we are expecting the second half of this fiscal year to have a little weaker tax return numbers. So I would not think you could, double that and say that's what we're going to receive for the year. At this point, 3 months into this this new world, this new rules, we'll hopefully be able to give you a little better clarification of what that really means to the city's revenue stream. But yeah, we're at this point, we don't have any reason to believe that our conservative estimate of 13.2 in this fund and 13.8 in the other fund are still valid for the year. We're comfortable with those, but I'm not comfortable with saying they're going to be higher just because the first 6 months was higher.
Okay.
And we are seeing some slowdown in the receipts as we move into this. Miscellaneous and interest revenue, of course, are what they are. A big chunk of the miscellaneous is related to the Build America Bond program, which pays a portion of our interest costs for our debt service. And our streetlight fees, again, which fund that network and improvements to that network. Looking at this fund, we have a portion of the fund, $7.6 million, that is related to operations, and that deals with field and facilities, landscape maintenance, the engineering fund, the streets fund, snow removal, all those type of operational issues. And then we have our capital components, which are going to be, I'm sure, part of our next agenda item, which is the mid-year public works update, and also the open space update that we're going into. But as you can see, we budgeted 1.485 for open space this year. Transient lodging is, of course, the tax on hotels and motels, otherwise called the bed tax, and those are the projects that the council approved and where we are spent so far. Some of them have happened, been funded, and others are still in the works for the second half of the year. Again, the receipts are good in that fund. Possibly here we are going to exceed our projected budget, but it's a lot lower number, again, at 632, so a increase over is not a large sum, and it's a very restricted use.
I understand that fund is a very restricted use. Have we ever done any sort of an analysis with regards to the demands put on police and fire by transient occupants that come and rent hotel rooms, etc., in the city in the name of tourism promotion?
I would defer to legal, but I believe state law and even our ballot language pretty much restricts this just to tourism and recreation development as opposed to paying for public safety costs, but I'll defer to John.
I understand your comment with the state perspective, but on the other hand, if it's things like the rodeo and it's things like the courthouse lighting and it's things like etc. that are tourism driven, that are putting a burden of cost onto police and fire.
And we do.
There has got to be a mechanism in which you can assign a certain portion of that cost to cover those costs, because if it weren't for those events, you wouldn't have the demand on that service.
Right, Councilman, and we do assign, as part of that annual process, $25,000 to overtime to help cover police, fire, and even other department streets overtime needed for those events, for the parades, for the other things like that. So there is that small portion in here, but.
And I heard you loud and clear, but does that cover the cost? I mean, you know, $25,000 is a lot of money, but cops cost a lot of money, fire departments cost a lot of money, and the services they deliver for special events cost a lot of money. Have we ever done an analysis to have a full comprehensive overview as to what, whether it's the rodeo, whether it's courthouse lighting, whether it's Acker Theater, whether it's, you know, a myriad of different things, what the actual cost to provide those services that are necessary in the name of public health and safety to make sure that the public is safe while in Prescott, or the public of Prescott safe while going to these special events, actually costs this city.
Councilman, yeah, we do rely on the departments to bring up the need for the overtime for those type of events. We will work with them during this budget process to get a better handle on that for you and bring you something as part of the budget workshop.
Thank you.
Moving on, impact fees. As you know, we went through a relatively lengthy process recently going through impact fees. These are the governmental impact fees, revenues received to date. We only have one project in the impact fee fund for this year. That's the $25,000 for the Yavapai College tennis court contribution. While we're looking at impact fees, as you know, all those basically are not in effect anymore. Currently, the balances, the next slide, 10, gives you the balances in each of those individual funds that is available and that we can discuss during the budget process this year as we look at appropriations in future years for growth-related projects. And again, it is related to any capacity increase growth-related projects. We have a few other governmental funds before we get into the enterprise funds. These four are the grants fund, which obviously is miscellaneous grants. A big number. We put $6 million in there because we try for a lot of grants. We need that appropriation there in case we get them. Obviously, if we don't get the grants, we don't spend the money. The Acker Fund, the miscellaneous gifts and donations is budgeted at what is in that fund each year. And then the debt service fund, which deals with the repayment of debt service for general obligation bonds related to the lakes purchase, and also one special assessment district is why that amount has become quite low in the last few years. As we get into the enterprise funds, again, Public Works has the next presentation, which will get more into the individual capital projects, but we'll look at the revenues. As you know, as part of the process impact fee and included a revenue rate setting component for water and wastewater. As you can see, the revenues for water are about where you'd expect them at 49%, especially considering we just had a rate increase that will be going into this fund, so we're comfortable with those projections. The impact fee numbers were set pre-study, so if you're wondering, you know, I thought growth was up, why are the impact fee receipts, you know, half of what we thought they would be? It's because, of course, the rates ended up being significantly lower than they used to be. Those will be adjusted as we go through this next budget cycle. Obviously, debt proceeds, we still have 3 active WIFA loans, Water Infrastructure Financing Authority loans. One of those is in the, actually only 2 active, we just closed one. One is in water and one is in the wastewater fund, and those are just receipts on that loan. And then the intergovernmental contributions that you see there relate to the Big Chino Water Ranch and the project with Prescott Valley, and we have not had any expenses that require contribution at this point this year. Operational expenditures are in good shape in the water fund as well. As you can see, well below the 50% needed. And then we have capital outlay and those things in our impact fee funds, which again are down because of the study that adopted a new capital plan and all that. Wastewater, pretty much the same story. Revenues are about right at 51%. Again, impact fees are below because, again, pre-study. Those will be adjusted as we go through the cycle this year. The bond WIFA financing here is related to the new wastewater treatment plant that was finished up or is being finished up this year. And then the operational expenditures are about where you'd expect them. Nothing, I don't have any other real comments there unless anybody has a question. Solid waste and transfer station, looking at the revenues, you can see our trash collection fees are actually above the 50%, where our transfer station fees are relatively low. That's related more to the 1.2 million was kind of a higher budget. Again, this gets into the governmental budgeting. You need to have their appropriation to spend the money. So you project transfer station fees at a level and, of course, tipping fees to get rid of the waste at a level so that that appropriation is available in case the business it comes in and you have to get rid of the waste. So looking at last year, we were closer to $1 million than a 1.2 million. So the 431 is not too far off of where it should be. But as you can see from the operating expenses, tipping fees and other things are down. So we're well within the operating parameters of this budget with operating at 43%. And capital projects, again, are below the amount. The next page, yes, sir.
Back then, maybe I just didn't understand what you just said. Why are we 90% on recycling revenue?
We're making a little better money than we had projected in the budget with some recycling programs, the commercial recycling. Ow, sorry, can't get my neck to work anymore.
Don't use the
or my shoulder. I was looking to see if Stephanie Miller was here or wanted to comment on it, but I believe the recycling revenues are related to new contracts on how we get rid of recyclables, and we're doing better than we had projected. Again, governmental budgeting is, as you guys are familiar with after doing this for so many years, or it's different than business budgeting in that we start the process now. You know, our projections are a year old now. They'll be 18 months old by the time the year is up. It makes it hard to catch on with the new contracts, but we try to give enough capacity in there to allow it to work out.
Okay, thank you.
The next page is related to our airport fund. We have a little different presentation than we've done on the other funds here in that we tried to separate operations from the capital projects because airport always has so many grants and capital projects that kind of skews the look at how operations are covering. As you can see, the revenues are pretty good with total revenues about 49% of the year, at 49% at 50% of the year. Their expenses are well below the 50% mark at 38, and they actually have a small operating income for the first half of the year at 51,000. Capital projects, again, grants are dependent on grants, getting the grants and getting everything in compliance to make those grants happen. So that's why we separated those out to make it a clear look at what the operations were doing. Need to take a breath before we get to the golf course here. But looking at the golf course, we did not compare it to budget in this presentation. This is slides 16 and 17. The reason we didn't compare it to budget is, of course, because we have our new operational contract out there, and we adopted a relatively high budget so that appropriation would be available. We felt a more accurate or more helpful comparison would be to look at the last same period last year to this period this year with Billy Casper managing the golf course. As you can see, we look at the operation components, the operating part of the golf course first, and you can see revenues are up significantly, 122,000 over the prior first 6 months of last fiscal year. Looking at expenses, several expenses are higher They had some capital items. We also put the full Billy Casper Golf management fee in this portion of the statement, just because there wasn't a real good basis other than half and half to split it between this and the restaurant. So it all shows here. So unfortunately, the operational components show that the net operational income is slightly less than it was last year. But when we look on to the restaurant and include those two together, we do end up better off than we were last year at this time. And you have a transitional period as you work in a new management team, and Joe and the team out there is working through this and taking care of the problems as they come up. And the goal and the thoughts are that it's going to keep getting better and keep improving as we move forward. But looking at the restaurant itself, you can see revenues are up, expenses are down. For a net revenue from the restaurant is $62,000 more than the year before. Same not the year, but the 6 months of last year, bringing the whole money before maintenance and other things up $18,000. And then of course we have debt service down because some of the debt's been paid off, and internal charges are of course down because a lot of the internal functions that we used to do at other functions in the city are now being done by Billy Casper, so those are essentially up in that Billy Casper management fee. For a net position is $66,000 better than in net income than it was the first 6 months of last year.
Joe, just out of curiosity, was the weather similar, or was this year a little bit wetter, colder?
Good question, Councilman Arnold. The months of October, November, December, we were down a little bit over last year. If you remember last year, we didn't really have a winter. This year we did have winter, and those months were down a little bit. Good news is January's been just really, really good. We did 17 more events than we did last year at the Centennial Center. So we about doubled the events at the Centennial Center. So some of the marketing that Billy Casper is doing is taking a little time to kick in, but it's beginning to. And, I've said it before, golf is all about the weather. You have a good winter, you're going to have a good year. You have a bad winter, you're going to struggle. So that's kind of what we're seeing. But overall, we're in a better position than we were, and we expect to improve on that.
Thank you.
Also, as part of our enterprise fund, or proprietary funds actually, not enterprise, but in the proprietary funds include enterprise and internal service. We have 4 internal service funds, which are on slide 18. Again, not compared to budget, because again, it's more compared to the revenues that cover these costs. The engineering fund, of course, charges out for the projects that they work on. Facilities charges out for square footage fees based on facilities that they take care of. And fleet does it based on hours and parts and markup on the parts. And the risk management, we still are maintaining an internal service fund for risk management as we transition from being self-funded to the pool. This fund obviously is a lot less than you've seen in prior years. It collects the monies from the individual funds of the city. It pays the risk management pool, and it covers the deductibles that we have on those claims come out of this pool. So that's why that fund will be around for the next several years, if not permanently at some level.
Did you say we mark up the parts that we sell ourselves?
Yeah, for the cost of the parts guy ordering them and getting them in and having them here, just like you do when you go to your mechanic.
Gotcha.
Okay, looking ahead at next fiscal year, and we've talked quite a bit about this on Friday with the legislative delegation when they were here at the meeting. Looking at pension costs, and pension costs are always an issue anymore with government. Looking at the Arizona State Retirement, which is where a majority of our employees are at, 426 were enrolled as of the last census and the valuation. They're actually having a slight decrease this year. It's relatively well-run fund. Its benefits and its future benefits, all of its pension obligations are well laid out. It's also a much larger fund than the public safety pension, much larger. Just to give you some order of magnitude on the size of Arizona State Retirement, again, their assets that they have under management are about $35 billion with a B, and their liability is at $42 billion. So they are at about a 75-80% funded ratio, which is about where you want to see a pension plan for a healthy pension plan. That's about where you want to see it run at. That's the most effective level for them. Public safety pensions statewide are a completely different issue. We have two separate individual funds. There's 256 individual public PSPRS pension divisions across the state of Arizona. They have total, get to the right printout. It's hard to swim with one hand. You know. The total liability of all 256 pensions statewide, just to give you an order of magnitude relating it to the Arizona State Retirement, is $12.2 billion. So as you can see, it's significantly smaller than Arizona State Retirement, and it's divided into 256 individual management funds, of which we're part of, obviously. The unfunded portion of that 12.2 billion statewide is 6.2. So they're about 50% statewide funded. Unfortunately, City of Prescott is in the lower half of that. Our unfunded percentage, our funded percentage is closer to 25%. So we're 75% unfunded, which is, again, a very concerning fact, and that's why you're seeing here with this schedule, you're seeing our fire pension costs going from 59.6% to about 75% for next year if we would go to the full actuarial amount, and police the same way, going from 50 to 67. Now, there was a lawsuit that reversed some actions that the legislature took last year, which were designed to help resolve some of the problems with these pension plans. Because that lawsuit happened, the board opted to give employers, City of Prescott being two of them, for our two different pensions, the option to pick a 3-year phase-in of this higher level. So as you can see there, we have the actuarial rate, which is what it should be based on this increased cost, and then what we can do is a 3-year phase-in of that amount. Again, it's a hard decision because there's this big liability out there, but again, we need to resolve the funding issues, and as Karen, Councilwoman Fan was talking about on Friday, they're putting together a packet to take to the voters in 2016 to help resolve these issues, because that's what the court decision said. The legislature cannot make these changes. It needs to be done by the voters because it's a voter plan. So, you know, the goal here is we have to fix the program so that they can have a future going forward, and our police and firemen can have a pension. But as we stand right now, we do have a bit of a budgeting issue as we move into next year. Not that it'll make you feel any better, but we are not the highest employers in the 256 out there. There is one at 122%, and 93, 92, 90. Even the Department of Public Safety is at 76%, which is a pretty significant participant. So I do have a complete list with ours. We are near the top, as you can see from my yellow marks of our two pensions, but we're not on the top. So as we go forward, if we do the full actuarial rate, we'll need to come up with, just for pension cost, 1.25 in the general fund for next year. And if we do the 3-year phase-in, which again is up to management and council to make those decisions, it'll be 327 in the next year, but we'll see a significant increase each of the next 3 years as we work into that new higher fee.
Mark?
Yes, sir.
You've got a number that you just told us. Are there revenue increases? I think it's it's imperative that the public hear these things. I really do. Are the revenues keeping up with the cost increase?
No, Councilman, they are not. And
Thank
you. And we got a slide in a few to talk about that. And as I mentioned up front, the difference between our enterprise funds, we do a service, we get a fee for that service. Our governmental funds, general fund being the biggest one, our revenues have no real correlation to the needs or the cost of what we have to do. Again, from Friday's discussion, we have some legislative issues coming up this next year. We have the contracting change, which Councilwoman Wilcox brought up as far as projecting the end of the year. We're estimating this next year we'll see a $300,000 reduction in our sales tax based on that change in construction. Even with the changes that Karen's bringing forward, it's still going to affect us. We don't know. It's kind of a broad guess. It's really hard to tell what it's going to do because of the data we have is not really detailed enough to get out there. So we'll see as we move into the next 6 months what it looks like. Governor's budget has 3 significant issues against our state shared TPT tax. Temporary staff for the DOR, Department of Revenue, as we move into the simplification and centralization of tax collection. There's assessment of 76 cents per every resident. That's going to cost us $30,000 as we go into next year. A permanent operating cost from the state shared revenue to cities of $8.2 million is going to be diverted to DOR to help cover these costs. The city's share of that 8.2 is about $65,000. And then there is additional $2 million for additional collectors and collection efforts that will be needed with the new increase in sales tax account. Those monies are actually from the base TPT revenue, so that reduces across the board. Only about $500,000 hit the cities and towns, and of that $500,000, about $4,000 will be coming from the city of Prescott. There's 2 legislations that are out there right now that could have a significant impact if they move forward on our general fund funding and our ability to continue some of these basic services. There's a proposal, House Bill 2254, which I'm sure Allison will talk about later, deals with the 4-year phase out of rental sales tax, privilege tax on rental properties. So that would be about $160,000 a year more out of the general fund each year for the next 4 years, for a total of $640,000 reduction in our general fund revenues. Pretty devastating bill. Hopefully that won't go anywhere. It will also impact our streets fund. Looking at the reduction this year, next year, the 16 year, it would be $140,000 reduction in that fund. There is also a proposal to move multi-family trash collection from a residential trash collection into a commercial trash collection, which would open it up to outside competition, which could have a potential impact of us losing, again, some of our multifamily accounts, which generally are more profitable accounts in the system, which allow us to have an overall trash fee that's pretty much lower than outside the city limits. Again, our total multifamily is about $582,000, and we project that we could lose up to around $116,000 of that in a year. That would be in the solid waste fund. So as Councilman Lamerson alluded to, this next slide, slide 22, we look at basically the 2 different funding options in the general fund as we move into this budget year. We do project the economy to continue to recover in some level. We expect to see some growth even with the added regional competition we're seeing. We expect to see some additional growth in aspects of our sales tax base of about $300,000. Obviously, we had the legislative reductions, part of that being the reduction in sales tax we're going to see from construction. So we have that down of about $560,000. We have the pension costs if the city decides to fund the full level this first year, which would be relatively difficult. As your budget director, I feel comfortable saying that, to come up with that $1.28 million this year, or the 3-year phase-in, which is our second column. And then we also, sitting on the trust board, they are debating, there is some level of increased health insurance costs for our employees that will, of course, hit our employees, but it's also going to hit the city's cost as well. And we're estimating that at this time at about $200,000 in the general fund. So depending on the decision on using the 3-year phase-in or not, we're looking at a reduction of available resources in the general fund of anywhere between $1.7 million and $800,000 going into budget year 16, which is a significant portion of our general fund. I believe it's about 6% of our general fund. Also, we have the other unknowns. There could be more legislation that could further impact state shared revenues, and of course, liability insurance rates and workers' comp rates. We never know until kind of late in the process, so we are not sure where those are going. Generally not. We did see the ASRS pension rate went down, which was good. Not a lot, but it went down. With that, concluding with just kind of a look at the next 6 months as we go through the budget process. The items in red are basically public meetings, council meetings. Today, our first red item there is the mid-year budget report. Public Works has a mid-year report. This goes on next week. That big meeting related to the council discussion on priorities on February 12th at 9 o'clock right here. Don't miss it. And then the council workshops and follow-up on priorities you can see on the bottom of the schedule there. I won't read them all to you. Concluding in June as we go into our official public hearings and consideration on the budget. With that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
I have one. When are you scheduled to give this full budget presentation to the state legislature? These guys down there need to understand what we're going through here. And understand that they don't give us any tools to work with. Our police and our firefighters are underfunded. Our regular employers are underfunded. We've got streets that are going to be falling apart. Just where do you go?
Yeah, and again, on our meeting on Friday, talking to the legislature, and Allison and everybody makes them, and you guys all make them very aware of it every time we talk to them. And Karen, Representative Kenner, and Representative Campbell are very familiar with our needs and our concerns.
Could I ask you if you would please, Allison, send them a PDF, our representatives, of this budget outlook? I think they need to understand exactly what we're understanding. Thank you.
And we provided a lot of this data in that meeting on Friday in the handout that we did give them, councilmen. And again, the requirement, just not to stick up for the legislatures, but the requirement for this election to raise sales tax is relatively unique to Prescott. Most cities can raise their sales tax just with a vote of the council. Our charter does require a vote of the people to raise it over that 1%. So part of it is our charter, right? Not just the legislature.
I think part of the process of covering costs, Mark, is to be very candid at all times with the taxpayer residents of the city of Prescott. There's a significant dilemma at hand. And when we talk about the basic services, the public health and safety of this community, they need to know that our ability to provide that service is being compromised significantly. So unless we're honest with them at all times, when we go to ask them, guys, look, we need another tool in the box to help continue the good basic services you've become accustomed to. In fact, at this point in time, you now demand, okay, which includes response times, the amount of police you have on the streets, the amount of firemen that you have on the streets. We need to be able to have an open dialogue with the public when we go to them and say, hey, look, we need a dedicated revenue source to help fund police and fire. It's just that simple.
Charlie.
Mark, if nothing changes, we have a $2 million shortfall from either new expenses or reduced revenue that we've got to address in this upcoming budget.
Well, what you saw up here is not the entire picture. We'll see the entire picture on the 12th. looking at the capital items, large capital and so forth, we have capital equipment in the fire department, for example, which is separately broken out. And for those firemen, firefighters, to operate safely, we have to buy $450,000 worth of breathing apparatus. So we will have a list of those capital items which will not, those are expenditures, of course, which will not improve the picture, but certainly it will make the challenge more daunting.
And I appreciate that. And let me restate it. Based upon the general fund operating expenditures, we have a $2 million issue that we have to deal with on top of the capital and the other aspects of running the city government.
That is correct, without finding out from the departments any other additional needs that might be out there.
Yeah, but that's the worst case with the not using the 3-year phase-in.
Correct. Again, it'll be there in 3 years.
Yep. And as we talk about that, just as a heads up, I really want to understand from PSPRS and the actuarial tables what the impact of taking advantage of the 3-year phase-in would be versus the going to the full either now or in the second year, so that we can make a informed decision about that. And then my comment on the mid-year report overall, clearly the departments are working very hard to keep under budget, and that's evident, and I appreciate the work that everybody's doing at the city to keep us moving forward. I'm very pleased to hear about the golf course. You know, it's a piece of the puzzle, but it's moving in the right direction. So if we keep that going, I think we're going to be in okay shape as we look at some major challenges in a few more months.
Greg? Gene? Good. Thanks.
Item 1C, presentation of the Public Works Capital Improvement Program at mid-fiscal year 2015.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, my name is Steve Oroz. I'm the Capital Program Manager and Private Development Manager for Public Works. And what we're providing here today is a snapshot of our water, wastewater, streets program to date for this fiscal year. As you've heard, funding for all these projects come from multiple sources. The Water Fund, the Streets Fund, the Wastewater Fund, and other intergovernmental partners that we have, the county and FEMA. This presentation focuses mainly on the construction projects, while the capital program includes other elements that for facility maintenance and operations, system upgrades, and other water resource issues like the TMDLs that we've heard about. Quick snapshot of where we are for this first part of fiscal year 15. We have various water projects that have been either completed or under construction this first 6 months of the fiscal year. Wastewater, streets, a drainage project. Combination of those projects totals about $10.5 million of projects completed for this fiscal year, and the overall project construction cost of those projects, which is spread over multiple fiscal years, is about $67 million of value. Next couple slides here are some pictures of some of these projects to give you a perspective. Airport well number 3 is an equipping project to deal with the water quality out by the airport. Park Avenue sewer line being installed there. Sidewalk repair project, taking streets and sidewalks that look like that and making them passable. Some dam repairs, paving along Park Avenue again. Small water mains is a key project that we have that's multi-phase. It's taking old, antiquated small water mains and upsizing them to provide better water service for our citizens. Some additional projects here. You've heard about our pavement program, and on the left are before and after pictures of one of our resurfacing projects. Zone 27 tank improvements. There's a picture of the tank that's there. We've been working with Field and Facilities to assist them in their Sundog landfill cap repairs. And we've heard about the wastewater reclamation facility, first phase as well. Back to some numbers. Projects that we have in design right now. We have, they're broken out into various areas. Various street projects that we have under design right now are in the first column. Second column is the status of the design by the end of the fiscal year, which is from, by June 30, we expect to have the projects at the completion level. With the construction cost estimates right now, about $22 million of streets. In the water area, we have about 6 projects that are in various stages of design right now, totaling about $8.4 million. In the drainage area, we have 7 projects totaling about 3.1. Wastewater, we have the Sundog trunk main project in design right now. So a total right now of design, we have almost $41 million of projects in the hopper to be constructed in future fiscal years.
Steve, of those
Yes.
Street design projects that are in design, which of those have bicycle safety features incorporated in them?
Most of these projects are reconstruction projects where existing facilities, if they're there, are maintained or improved slightly. I don't see any specific bike-related projects in any of those categories. Many of those projects have paved shoulders, which bicyclists can use, as well as not necessarily specifically a dedicated bike lane, but we are providing paved shoulders on many of those projects.
You know I'm going to keep bringing it up.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay. And as with Mr. Whitfield's presentation, feel free to ask any questions as we get to various points.
I do.
Okay.
You know, I look at this list, and this is an aggravating list to me, and I'm not going to keep beating it to death like Gene and her bicycle lanes. However, I will tell you that these developments are relatively new in the scope of developments. Black Hawk is one of those. Smoke Tree is one of those. These different projects that are up here, that were developer-driven projects, where either the city failed or the engineers failed, the designers failed, somebody failed, if after the fact the city of Prescott and their tax monies have to come back and fix a relatively new subdivision. So I hope somewhere down the line, I want to make it loud and clear, I hope this is fixed, because oftentimes we let these developers come in, we brush them away, they do their projects, and I'm not against development, but when I see Black Hawk at $1.3 million, that was a developed subdivision, it aggravates the living tar out of me that it wasn't done in the first place the right way. So I hope we've corrected that.
We are working towards that, yes. Looking forward to the rest of the fiscal year, we have a number of projects that are in various stages of construction or about ready to go to construction. We have 5 water projects that are either bidding last month, this month, under construction, about $5 million of water projects. In the streets area, we have 6 projects of about $9 million of total construction cost, including the Park Avenue project that's wrapping up, and the pavement preservation project that's the second half, the spring construction season. We have 2 drainage projects, both coming before you here in February for award of construction contracts, with a total of about $16 million of construction projects scheduled for the next few months. In summary, we've completed about $10.5 million of construction. The second half of the year is about $16 million of construction projects scheduled. and we have about $40 million of projects in design ready to be constructed and moving on into the next fiscal year. So with that, I'll entertain any questions or clarifications.
Do we have anticipation of enough money, Mark, when that sales tax is reduced to 75% to do the anticipated projects in 16?
We did look at that in 16. I think we're good in 16, but that'll be more of a discussion on the 12th, I believe. We'll get more into that in detail.
Appreciate that.
Anybody else?
Mayor, mine's kind of, this is tied into the open space and the bicycle conversation later. I don't know when to bring this up, but during these capital projects, and I'm at the risk of sounding like Gene, instead of looking at the streets, is it possible to look at the width of the sidewalks like Scottsdale does? They make 6-foot sidewalks. You got a slow side and a fast side. I mean, is that something that can be looked at as far as, instead of looking at the streets, let's get them off the streets and maybe widen the sidewalks? I don't know, something to think about.
Councilman, I think we're going to have that discussion maybe very briefly in the upcoming agenda item, but as we speak more about an approach to looking at what bicyclists call and transportation professionals complete streets and so forth.
Yeah, Mayor, I just want to bring up that these are the projects that you have going on, that you have planned. It's how we're moving forward. It does not reflect really the needs of this community. I mean, when we saw the presentation on streets, I think was about $74 million to get up to need. So moving forward, we got to remember that even though we're spending this kind of money, it still doesn't fix all the problems that are out there.
Thank you, Mayor. At the risk of sounding like nobody, here again, if I had it clarified significantly last talk that we had, state of Arizona has a law, and whatever this council wants to do by policy doesn't usurp state law. Number one, the state allows for bicycle riders to be on any street in the state of Arizona, obeying the traffic laws that are geared specifically for bicycles. That doesn't give permission for anybody in a vehicle to run them over or challenge them. But it doesn't give permission for bicycles to be somewhere else other than a multi-purpose path that's designated for bicycles or on a public street unless otherwise posted. So I just want to make clear to folks who choose to ride bicycles in the state of Arizona, they are legally allowed to do that unless that street is posted, don't ride your bicycle here. Am I correct on that?
That is correct. They
All right.
need to follow the same rules as a motor vehicle.
Thank you.
Gene? Hold on.
I'll save it
Right
for
there.
the next.
Okay, Steve, thanks very much.
Appreciate it.
Item 1D, open space update.
We might get a violation, John.
Good night, Mike.
Good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Give her a
Afternoon,
minute.
Joe.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor, Council. About 2013, I think it was, the city departments were asked, among other things, to become more entrepreneurial, to look at things more entrepreneurial, more from the business perspective. And, keeping that in mind and recognizing that the sales tax that funds open space was going to be expiring at the end of 2015, the Recreation Services Department set out basically with the 2008 open space master plan in hand. We set out to get input from stakeholders, interested citizens, other land managers, outdoor-based nonprofits, to come up with maybe the best way to explain it is to use the 2008 open space master plan as the basis understanding that things have changed a little bit from 2008 to where we're at right now, and sort of take another look at that document and modernize it, if nothing else. And so with that in mind, we set out to do that, and with a series of meetings. And we got together with our nonprofit partners and citizen groups, and this is just a little background here that we've been doing this since the 90s. We started off, this is kind of a recap of March 4th of 2014 that we brought to you guys, but we've been purchasing these parcels since 1990s. They're now city-owned. They have special recreational and natural parkland characteristics. They also afford preservation while supporting outdoor recreation opportunities and tourism. Recent statistics from the city trail counters on 48 of the 68 miles that we have in the Mile High Trail system reveal that we're getting about 567,000 trail visits per year. So that's about 1,500 per day. If we were to extrapolate that a little bit further and take it out to the 68 miles, we estimate we'd have about 700,000 trail visits per year, or about 2,000 per day. We continue to build more trail, and we continue to see trail use numbers go up. So we don't feel like we're at any point where there's any kind of a saturation of trails. In fact, quite the opposite, that we're getting more users. The value criteria that was set out in the 2008 council-adopted open space plan were recreational, scenic, ecological, prehistoric, historic, cultural, economic, and provide connectivity. By connectivity, we mean connectivity to other open space parcels. We mean connectivity to businesses, connectivity to schools, and those types of things. There's more strategy to acquiring open space than just an outright purchase. There's plenty of tools in the toolbox, and of course, the first options are to use those that are at no cost to the taxpayers, which are, I won't go through all of these, but through planned area development or master plans. A lot of trail dedications and open space dedications come through those. We have state land right-of-way trail leases, which we've used quite a bit in the past. There is a little cost associated with that. License agreements, which we've been successful with. Donated trail easements, which we just recently went through the Greenways Trail system and had 9 different property owners donate trail easements to the city of Prescott. So we've been pretty successful. Nice. Also land donations. So there's more tools than just purchase, and we try obviously to use the least expensive of those first. Chronology of the recent open space planning efforts that I alluded to in the opening. We first off revisited the 2008 master plan and looked at the details within that. And then we facilitated a series of stakeholder meetings at the Grace Parks Activity Center. We had representation from some of the general plan committee folks, as well as other land managers, outdoor-based nonprofits, and other interested citizens. Those meetings occurred and continued through 2012, and we further defined specific properties and opportunities, with many properties that presented opportunities for passive recreation, such as trails. In 2012, we presented progress and details to the city's general plan committee and provided a tour of many of the identified geographical areas. As we further analyzed property, we looked at it and separated them into where funding was not needed to accomplish what we would like to do, versus properties where the 1% sales tax revenues might be needed for an acquisition. So then again, on March 4th of 2014, we did a presentation to council and presented an overview of the open space program and the various milestones. We continue to work with the nonprofits to gather information and get their input. So the collective vision through this process, some of the highlights were we wanted the open space efforts to support tourism efforts. One of the unique things about outdoor recreation and trails that they offer when it pertains to tourism is that they can be accomplished or done primarily in the shoulder seasons. Our highest trail visitation typically happens in March. It happens in January. So a lot of the outdoor recreation opportunities are things that can help support the tourism effort in the shoulder seasons. Business attraction and retention. A lot of businesses that want to move here want to know what kind of quality of life, what kind of outdoor opportunities does the city provide. So that's an important part. to contribute to the quality of life, obviously, protect the watershed, protect wildlife habitat and corridors, highlight the natural resources, increase education and public access, provide the opportunity for alternative transportation, complement defensible space efforts, and also to complement or to avoid duplication of other entities so that we're not duplicating what somebody else is doing. So after this, we separated, we did about what we'd call, I guess, a 20,000-foot view of Prescott, the city of Prescott and the area, and identified 48 properties, and then we broke those into 4 different categories. Designation via development agreements, as I talked about before, as properties develop, working with the developers to get open space or trail easements put into the developments. Access to open space via trail easements and license agreements. A good example is the greenways. Designations that would use the 1% sales tax monies for that purchase. Conservation via donations. There's opportunities that come up occasionally, and we had one recently that was, again, part of the greenways that was an outright land donation. And then other properties and areas that were identified as suitable for conservation. So the current 1-cent streets and open space tax will expire and be replaced on January 1 with the 3-quarter, as we all know. And so to enable continuation of open space plans, or to strategize might be a better word, we bring a couple of recommendations for discussion forward for you. And I'll go into those in a little more detail in the next slides, but there's an opportunity to purchase some property at Goldwater Lake, and the budgeted amount for that would be $500,000 if council saw fit to bring that back forward. And the second recommendation is some right-of-way leases on state trust lands for some trail easements, and again, I'll get into those in just a minute, and that would be not to exceed $230,000. So this is the Goldwater Lake land acquisition. It was originally budgeted in 2015 and is in the budget at $385,000. The reason for the increase in that is that the area we were hoping to, I guess what you might call cherry pick the property a little bit more, since the property where the entry road comes in right now is pretty steep and a lot of canyons in it. We wanted to kind of come over here and draw a line and capitalize on the parts of the property that was that's a little more accessible and a little more user-friendly. The Forest Service, however, would like to see us purchase the property that would encompass the existing easements that we have through the National Forest to access the property right now. So that's the reason that budget grew a little bit. I'll go, I guess in the next map, I'll be able to show you a little bit better what we might contemplate. Again, being entrepreneurial, what we might be able to do with the property if council so chose to bring it back forward. I do want to point out, though, that this process is fairly time-consuming with Prescott National Forest. It's done through what's called the Townside Act, and will require 18 months somewhere in that area to accomplish. We've had some preliminary discussions.
Question, Joe. Number one, thank you for bringing this forward. I know the National Forest would like to sell that property to the city of Prescott. Have they made that property fire-wise at all, or would we buy that and then assume the liability of bringing that land up to a standard that we can defend?
Councilman Lambertson, that's a great question, because we always have to keep our eye on what the maintenance costs are. This property has been cleaned up in large part with some firewise. We did an extensive part in the city-owned portion, but there's also been some timber sales up in that area recently, so it's in pretty good shape. So here's a little better picture of what that looks like and what we might contemplate doing. This is all just theoretical at this point, but we looked at the property and said what kind of recreational uses could be established there that could again create some direct revenue through user fees, but also bring the visitation that comes with people that would come up for the valley and spend some time up here. We have a couple camping loops that we had theoretically put on here that might be an option to bring forward for overnight camping. Currently, it's all day use. Very, very heavily visited park. Even with the expansion that we did recently, which added 104 parking spots, we've still found ourselves on the busy weekends where it's parked out. The lake sits at 6,000 feet. It's surrounded by ponderosa pine. It's really appealing to folks from the valley, especially on a hot July day.
Isn't there a lot of trail connectivity on private trails through Banning Creek as well as through the National Forest that could connect to this?
Councilman Blair, yes, there is. There's some pretty major trails that run through. In fact, this green that you see down here is a trail that runs through there. And it's actually part of the Circle Trail, too. So the other thought that we put down on paper here to be discussed was we've had a very positive experience with disc golf out at Watson Lake. We've seen visitation increase based on that 9-hole course that we put in out there. We have been approached by the local disc club wanting to get an 18-hole course out here that would be sanctioned by the appropriate association and bring in sanctioned tournaments along with that. In walking the property and looking at it, there's an opportunity to put something in there that would be really a first-class facility that people would travel from other states to come visit. I do just want to point out that we currently, on Goldwater Lake, there is a portion there where the arrow points that we don't currently own. We're not contemplating that purchase at this particular time. That part of the lake is really steep. There really isn't much recreational opportunity, if you will, on that cove of the lake, just because it's a very, very steep mountain at that point.
Who owns that, Joe?
Prescott National Forest. And that could be contemplated, in the future, but it's really not anything that is going to affect purchasing. Would negligibly impact one way or the other what we use it for now. Okay, the second thing was the right-of-way leases on state trust lands, and the biggest one of that would be the Glassford Hill Trail that would take us off of the Peavine Trail up to the top of Glassford Hill at a point where it could connect to the future Prescott Valley Trail that they've proposed there. But would get us up to the top of Glassford Hill and then connect down on the other side and get onto the Iron King Trail. That's about 8.4 miles. Chris Hoskins and I have walked it before. The views up there are, of course, spectacular, but that one's the bigger one, 8.4 miles, and would connect to neighboring communities, which was another goal that was set out in our information gathering from the open space perspective and the trails perspective to connect to our neighbors. Another one is the a connection to the Prescott Circle Trail from the Prescott Gateway Mall. The idea there, even though this one's a little less than a mile, what it would do is get back to that connecting businesses to the trails. Also would accomplish a goal that I think would be kind of nice, which would be to get some trail signage, trailhead signage out on Highway 69, where we have a lot of vehicles that pass by there every day that would identify this as a trailhead for the Prescott Circle Trail, and again hopefully drive business to the mall, and then drive those mall customers also down onto the trail and connect to the Circle Trail. The last one is it's a kind of a reroute of an existing trail, the Turley Trail, which was built, I believe, in the 90s or maybe late 80s, but the construction practices weren't what we practice right now, which is to build trails that are sustainable, that get the water off them, that we don't have to put a lot of maintenance into. This was built up a lot of fall lines, and really, even though the majority of it is on the Forest Service, it's a harder trail to maintain. So this other proposal here would include 1.8 miles of a reroute there that would connect to Prescott National Forest, which is got in their plans to also reroute a portion of that trail. So make that trail much more sustainable. And again, all of this would be parts of the Circle Trail or accessed off of the Circle Trail. So it brings some connectivity to what we call the wheel, which is the Circle Trail, and this would add some spokes to that wheel. This is just a little bigger map that shows it a little bit better, but again, the Glassford Hill would come off of the Peavine and connect back to the Iron King. And that Peavine Trail is our most visited trail that we have in the Mile High Trail system. So as Mark pointed out before, in the FY15 budget, there's $1.485 million in there, and that was broken out into the Worth property acquisition that council wanted to hold $500,000 out in case there was an opportunity there, the $385,000 for the Goldwater Lake acquisition. We had $100,000 in there for the Glassford Hill right-of-way. That's the one portion of the trail I showed you earlier. And then there was $500,000 that was undesignated.
Question.
So, yes.
Can you tell me where we're at with the Worth property? Last I heard is we were asked to stand down with donations to that project because there was a philanthropist or whoever that wanted to donate and buy the whole thing. Are we still there? What's changed? We haven't had an update in over a year.
My understanding, Councilman Blair, and this is just really through the newspaper articles more than anything, that the donor who wanted to participate with the city of Prescott in that purchase of the Worth property moved over to the other side of the road, and they just recently purchased 65 acres on the other side of Highway 89. So the Worth property sale, again, not having any conversations to know for sure, it appears as though it's fallen by the wayside.
Joe, I got a question too, well, more like a comment or observation. It looks like with these leases on the state trust lands, instead of having to buy thousands of acres of open space, it looks like this is a cheap way to get access to thousands of acres of open space, at least through it anyway.
Councilman Cugnio, it does certainly open up those areas, connects to other open space also, but even though those are state trust lands that the trail easements go through, by acquiring a permit to be on that property, which I believe is $15 or $20 a year, you can access any of that property. So it does essentially, it's bigger than just the trail easement.
But it should be noted that because they are state trust lands, they're held in trust for the benefit of schools. And there's a statutory process that has to be followed. If there is someone, a private individual who wants to purchase those, they apply to put them up for auction, and the State Department is obligated, State Land Department is obligated then to follow that process and hold them open for auction. Now, we do have the option of purchasing conservation easements on those lands. So it's not like they're free open space to us. There is a trust obligation that they be used financially as assets to benefit the schools. So I really think it's important for us to look ahead at that whole area, the Storm Ranch, go back to the Worth property and keep talking with Mr. Worth. And AED, they own some property in there. It's just incredible, beautiful property that needs to be treated carefully, some of it preserved, limited development. But I really would like to see the council reserve some of this $1.485 million you just showed us that we're not ready to spend right now, but we should have available when the time comes to be able to purchase those conservation easements from the property owners who are willing to sell.
Thank you for that, Councilwoman Wilcox, and also leads me into the fact that since some of these, since the process with the Prescott National Forest and the process with the State Land Department can take a little bit longer and the fund will be expiring, we would recommend creating a restricted reserve for those amounts since they may roll over past that expiration date.
Joe, I guess two questions. If you had to choose between these two that you've presented to us, which one is the bigger bang for the city of Prescott?
You know, Councilman Lozelle, outdoor recreation is harder to gauge the economic impact. You know, it's really easy for me with a sports calendar and softball tournaments to say we had, you know, this many teams and this many people that traveled with them and they stayed this many nights. Obviously, outdoor recreation is a big component of our tourism visitation. So to be able to quantify which one's better than the other, I can't really tell you. I think they both have distinct advantages.
Does option two kind of accelerate the 50-mile loop that we've been trying to accomplish? Does it kind of accelerate that process?
No, it's really, aside from that, it's really a point of connection to that trail system. We've got the required easements that we need to complete the circle, with the exception of the one piece off of Williamson Valley Road. But this just complements that, I guess.
Now, on that first option, which is from the National Forest, and the proposed possible overnight camping, obviously that would be a later capital budget that we'd have to consider.
That's correct.
To build the proposal there.
That's correct. We've had pretty good success with the camping that we have at Watson Lake. We only do it about 6 months out of the year and 5 days a week, but we have pretty good occupancy rates, and I think we could tweak some things to make it a little bit better. But we would have to sit down and look at it, financial performance, and see
Sure.
what that projection might look like.
Thank you.
One more question, Joe. If any of these acquisitions seems to qualify for the use of park impact fees, it seems to me it's Goldwater Park. We're expanding an already wonderful asset that Prescott has because of its popularity and because of growth. What is your opinion about using park impact fees for that particular acquisition?
Well, I'm not quite sure. I'd have to go back and research to find out if it is eligible. I know that part of the logic behind the impact fees was if we had overnight camping there before, for example, and we had to expand on that overnight camping because now of these impacts, it would be eligible. The fact that we don't have camping there, I don't know whether or not that would qualify. That would be a question for finance, but it's possible.
Perhaps we could get an opinion from legal about whether or not it's appropriate to use impact fees for expansion of Goldwater Lake.
Well, as we know, the use of impact fees is really to deal with growth-related demands. So it is, it's difficult. It's easier. I think Joe was mentioning sort of your more traditional park uses. Your city parks and ball fields and those kinds of things. Those things are easier to justify the use of impact fees on because those can be attributed to growth of, essentially it's housing growth. In other words, if you expand housing into certain areas and there's no parks in that area, it's a geographic expansion, geographic growth. Or if there's an increase in density and there's not enough park space per person or whatever, you can use that. This is a little tougher because it's really not, it's as much a sort of tourism growth related as it is housing growth related, or maybe more tourism growth related. In other words, building campgrounds with, acquiring land and building campgrounds with impact fees, you may have a tough time justifying that that's related to the growth of the population of Prescott. It's not tied to growth in tourism. It's tied to growth in housing. So you have to be able to justify it that way.
It seems to me the argument is just as difficult when we talk about using open space monies to build a campground.
I think, I would agree. I think if the problem is impact fee money and impact fee use is much better defined by the state law. Open space is a fairly, in that, when the 1 cent sales tax was adopted, it wasn't very well defined. It basically said open space, and it did talk about a list of sort of uses, not in the bill itself or not in the initiative itself, but in sort of the materials. They talked about recreation, education, cultural, those kinds of things. So I think open space was really almost a misnomer for that sort of intended use. It was more open space, recreational, cultural, educational. So that seemed to be the intent, at least if you read the materials. But again, it's even with those materials, it was much less defined than when you're talking about impact fees. It's very, very specific and very, very narrow uses. So I think the ability to buy the land certainly is an open space notion. If you're buying land to maintain it as open space. Question is if it didn't buy it, would it still be open space under the Forest Service's ownership? I mean, that's sort of a policy question for you all. To use open space money to build something, if you're talking about if one of the available uses of open space money is recreation, then camping certainly falls within that.
And if I could just clarify something, that we wouldn't propose to build the facilities, the camping, with open space money. That would come from a later capital request that would come from the general fund possibly, or wherever, but it wouldn't be part of this proposal.
It would, I'm sorry. It would seem to me that we should have the ability to be able to tell by the participation of vehicles that are paying a fee of where their designation's from, whether it's an 86301, zip code, to be able to make a justification for expanding that park under impact fees. It doesn't necessarily have to be camping today, but if there's ramadas that are built and picnic tables and cooking areas that are necessary, needed because the public has expanded based upon rooftops, then we can come back and put camping spots on areas that already exist. So therefore, you're not violating the intent of the impact fee. So I think there's ways to look at this, but I think we need to do our homework up front and make sure that the people that are visiting the park, doing surveys on weekends or whatever you want to do, to find out 8631, 305, 303, 302, the people that are in our area of the city of Prescott that are utilizing that park. If you don't, it's hard to justify either way.
Well, Councilman Blair, that's a good point, but it was very clear when we did the expansion of Goldwater recently, the day use expansion, that was a lot of citizens, local citizens that were using that, and of course, the last improvements done there were in 1979, which I believe you were part of. So it was pretty obvious that was impact fee eligible.
Well, that's why I'm looking at it and say, when I go out there now and see the addition that we've done, and there's still people that are local that want to use ramadas for weddings and, camp out and take their kids for a hike or whatever the case may be. A lot of those people are local people. So how do you ever tell whether they're campers going to, Friendly Pines or Skyway Camp or coming up for a weekend unless you do some kind of study or survey to justify those funds to legal and to Mr. Woodfield? I think it needs to be done because I'd like to see the money spent out there. That's a huge asset for the city of Prescott.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, and I just wanted to thank him too. He sees almost $1.5 million and comes in and says, I only need about half of that to get these things done. I think a lot of times we like to spend up to that limit, and you haven't done that. I'm the liaison to Parks and Rec, and I just was at their meeting, and I got to say this, you guys are strategic, you're competent, you're professional. Everything you do takes in operations and maintenance as a thought. I mean, you people work really good together. I see good things coming out of this Goldwater Lake. It's going to be a big park for us to begin with, and the numbers here are just getting huge. Just the trails that they counted had 567,000 visits. That's a lot of folks, and when you talk about these little campgrounds, Goldwater Lake was tiny before we did the expansion. We did the expansion and it looks great. So I support your projects. I think they're good. I think getting these easements are a way to get us into the open space without having to just buy the big chunks of land. The government owns 85% of Arizona already, and I like getting out there and using it too, but buying it all up is going to be very hard for us, especially with what we saw Mr. Woodfield hand us a little bit earlier.
Joe, I appreciate what you brought forward to us. If I'm not mistaken, we've heard before from the lawyer that we can use Parks and Recreation impact fees for capital improvements, which purchase of parks is one of those things. If I heard that correctly in the past, that we can buy park ground with impact fees. I also understand we don't have impact fees anymore. This is a very finite bucket, and you have to be really, really prudent on what we spend the money on because it doesn't come back. It's not like a continuous fee. I happen to agree with my fellow council that the expansion of Goldwater Lake property seems like a pretty good idea with regards to the acquisition. And at this point, that's about where we're at. I mean, we don't have money to go just spend with impact fees. We don't have any money in the general fund. We know what that is. We know our revenues are going down. We know what that is in relationship to the cost of doing business going up. So I would say to capitalize as much as you can with the money that we still have within the impact fee portfolio with the Goldwater Lake projects. for acquisition.
Anyone else?
Yeah, just one other thing. Just and make it real quick, Joe. I know there's a lot of grants out there with the Arizona State, Department of Recreation and different things. Do we have the opportunity to be able to match some monies there for lake improvement funds, such as we did with Watson and Willow Lake? Are those options still available?
Well, those were swept. I mean, we are working with Game and Fish on some boat dock improvements at Goldwater Lake, so things like that. But those opportunities, we're constantly looking for them, and we're constantly, keeping our eyes open. There's not a lot of those available.
Okay. Don't let your guard down.
No.
Mayor, just wanted to point out, I just did the quick math really quick on this. This property that the Forest Service would be willing to sell us is about $7,700 an acre. I think when we were looking at the Granite Dells, I think the price was about $55,000 an acre. So, I mean, this project, it really makes our bucks go further in getting a park built and established.
And let me point something out on that. The 50 acres that we identified there got us to a point where we wanted to, the line we wanted to establish that gets us the best piece of that property. We may end up, depending upon what that appraisal comes in at, shrinking that 50 acres to fit the budget. So, in other words, it may be more than $7,700 an acre. We heard a price of $10,000 an acre, but we'll get to that. But it is much cheaper than a lot of the land acquisitions that have been done recently. That's correct.
Yeah.
One final comment. If we don't hold more than $730,000 in restricted reserve for open space, whatever, on that whole list that you gave us last year, I don't see how we can possibly move forward with that list and connect the pieces that we need to connect, that the council has already authorized the purchase of in the past, but there's no way to get from parcel A to parcel B. I think it's really important for us to hold the line and keep that $1.485 million in a restricted fund until the time comes for us to use it. Whether you decide to use impact fees on Goldwater Lake or open space, whatever fund it comes from, there's still other very, very important acquisitions, easements, donations, etc., to be had out there. So I really don't want to see it all swept away into the FY16 budget.
Thanks, Joe.
Item 1E, discussion of bicycle facilities within the city.
Gene, why don't you take the lead on that, and then we'll bring Craig into it on the conversations that we had today.
Okay. At last council meeting, you may recall, I had offered an amendment to a resolution when we were discussing designating State Bicycle Route 79 through the city of Prescott. And my amendment proposed to direct staff to evaluate that segment for bicycle safety features. It brings up the broader question of what is the council's policy about incorporating bicycle safety features in the projects we do, and about retrofitting the streets that we now have, some of which are very narrow, some are wide. We have the idea of multimodal use of sidewalks rather than the streets. I have been thinking a lot about putting together an advisory group, and I think I brought this up before. This would be a good time to have an ad hoc bicycle facility group as a mechanism or a conduit of information to bring back to the council. They could discuss in general the bicycle safety features policy, and then they could also address the designation of State Route 79.
Yes, that's pretty consistent with an informal discussion we had. as the councilwoman has pointed out, you know, we talked, a few of us, about, I guess I made 4 notes. Number one, Councilwoman Wilcox has described the ad hoc group that she's been thinking about for quite some time. In that ad hoc group, it could include a council member, certainly our city traffic engineer, and a good suggestion was made to bring a bicycle patrol officer from the PD into that group as time would allow. Secondly, rather than get into very general discussion of bicycle facilities in a public meeting here in council chambers, it would probably be a lot more efficient and effective to convene an ad hoc group, get a meeting or a series of meetings together, and their first job would be to scope out what there is to talk about, you know, regarding bicycle facilities, for then more focused analysis. Instead of talking about all possibilities in Prescott, maybe 5 or 6 very specific ones, which could include what should the state route or the bicycle route 79 be. Thirdly, that group could then suggest after meeting a couple of times, come up with a checkpoint and come back to the city council and the public and say, give a summary. We've been talking about these things. This is what we recommend in some particular time frame. And as the councilwoman has also indicated, on a parallel track here, which is really continuous, is education by the police department on bicycle awareness and safety, separate from this committee meeting. Certainly, this is something they do all the time, and certainly with some of the things that have happened, particularly the fatality, certainly there would be great community benefit in a concentrated education program for bicycle awareness and safety. So I think that's a pretty good list to start with. Put together an ad hoc group and let's get on with it.
Comments?
I agree with that for the most part. There's a lot of things that we can look at when the committee's formed. One thing I think or a couple things I'd like to keep in mind is when we come up with a recommendation, maybe a estimate of what you think that recommendation would cost to implement and where that money for those implementations would come from. Charlie and myself at lunch today, we went and drove part of that route that we talked about last time, and some of our streets are there's a lot of wideness to those streets that we can make some changes to fairly easily and accommodate this. And there's other areas where they are very, very skinny. If we were to install bike lanes, we'd be taking out sidewalks or moving over sidewalks. I mean, there's a lot of obstacles to overcome. There's a lot of money that would have to be spent, and surely it could get done. But then you look at the intersection where the young lady was run over, and that's just a really tough intersection to really fit anything through. I'm sure traffic engineering has run across these things many times before, and maybe we could have some recommendations to clean that up. But we just definitely need to keep cost in mind and where we're going to find that money moving forward. But I would support the forming of that committee.
Steve? Okay. Jim?
I don't have a problem with a citizen-driven ad hoc committee to look at what can be done in the city to make bicycling safer. I mean, that's a critical issue. The same as anything else. I mean, nobody wants to put people in harm's way. I go back to the state law that says bicycles can be on any street unless otherwise posted. That doesn't mean that every street in the city of Prescott are safe to ride bicycles on. And it's not because of just the bicyclists. I've been hollering about this for the last 12 years, that you got a bunch of crazy drivers out there that drive a whole lot faster than they should be when you have posted speed limits for a reason. Some of these roads weren't designed to drive 50, 60, 70 miles an hour on. And yet you can go out to Willow Creek Road almost any day of the week and see people driving what I would call not very prudent. and you can do that over on Rosser. You can do it almost anywhere in town. So if the issue is enforcement, maybe we haven't done as good a job as maybe we can with empowering the police to do enforcement better. I don't know what the answer is, but I don't have a problem with people who choose to ride bicycles in the streets of the city of Prescott bringing forward concepts that may improve their safety. So, Gene, I don't have a problem with this. I don't.
I agree with Councilman Lamerson's Title 28 interpretation of the traffic laws. We need to get Chris involved or somebody from, I'd like to get them off the road. So we've got all these trails coming in, bring them into those trails, how those can be incorporated with this 79 bicycle thing, or if it can be, and look at some of these key roads. I don't see anything in the near future in the budgetary constraints of the city making these immediate life safety changes for the bicyclists out there. It's going to have to come through education. That's the first and foremost. Awareness through, it's always going to be, not always, but for the most part, in the near future, a motorized city that bicyclists have to traverse through. So I think that it has to be through education. And that's where it comes in. And then on that ad hoc, if we can get future and current trails that are being used right now.
I think there needs to be a short-term, long-term look at it. Short-term would be taking the roadways as I help them do. They're on Sheldon Street with a complaint that was put into me about getting a grate fixed on Montezuma Street, White Spar, right in front of the fire department, where they're going vertical to the way the bicycles go, where the wheels would get stuck, and was a huge hazard. So when you look at those types of things, and the already existing bike lanes, or the existing bike lanes that we have any obstacles that we can correct right now, and how can we make what we have existing better, and then have a longer range plan of what we can do as far as separation. And I agree, you never want to put, at least in my opinion, you don't want to put bikes with traffic. When you got the onset of younger drivers, text messaging, social media, hamburgers, hot dogs, makeup, God knows what else in a car, and it runs up against a bicycler, you know what you end up getting, let alone having sun in the eyes. So anytime you can make a separation with a curb, a 6-inch curb, and have a multi-use path that includes a bicycle as well as pedestrians, is a smart idea.
And those are long-term.
Those are long-time fixes.
Built into our street thing.
On certain areas, you bet.
Well, and I had a citizen come up to me and say, what were you guys thinking when you were talking about putting the bikes onto the trails? Go, do you ever ride a 10-speed with those tires on a trail? It just doesn't happen. But, none of the stuff that we're looking at is new. It's been done other places. I mean, this committee might be able to pull from different cities. Flagstaff does it well. They also have a university up there, and they have bike paths that are just that. They're paved bike paths. But, yeah, and I guess I'll harp on it again, but that stuff costs money, but it has been done. And maybe if there's a plan in place, there will be a plan to get to that point.
And it's going to the nuance of like Austin, Texas, and looking at what they have for the multimodal, multi-use transportation paths, not just bicycles. It can include horses, it can include whatever you want to, but there are those elements out there that we can look at to try to add some different things into our plan.
Yeah, I think everything is well taken, and the intent that Gene has is you have to start someplace. We all agree with that, and problems will jump out, and solutions may jump out, and maybe there's opportunities that will jump out, but this will all be done in the open, and as it needs to come back to the council, that will happen. So, Craig, I think you've got what you need to work with Gene, and we move forward. Okay? Okay, let's go to item F.
1F, legislative update.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. As you're aware, we did have a good meeting with our legislative delegation last Friday, and so I just wanted to focus on a couple of bills that are coming out. I did provide you today with a list of recommendations for bill positions for just a number of bills that I would consider active. I am tracking and reviewing about 100 other ones, and the striker bills have started to come in this week. So This list may grow and change over time as the legislative process continues down in Phoenix. I just wanted to go through a couple. I was going to start with a couple of bills to support. Obviously, we've been talking about House Bill 2563. That's the Health Facility Substance Abuse Recovery Bill from Campbell. I would suggest that we support that. It has not been assigned to committee yet, and as Representative Fan pointed out on Friday, we have this week, next week, and the following week for bills to be able to be heard in House committee. So if it's not heard in the House committee by then, we will have to seek other options this year for taking it through the legislative process, either through an amendment or a striker to another bill, or through amending what we've already provided to make it more palatable to others. The House Bills 2590 and Senate Bill 1446 are the TPT reform fixes for the prime contracting. Representative Fan is carrying the House bill, and Senator Lesko is carrying the Senate bill. And so those are corrections that are they're fairly complicated to explain. I'd be happy to explain to you how they plan to correct that to deal with the alteration issue and create the thresholds and means tests for what counts as prime contracting under the prior law and what will count as essentially a minor repair, replacement, and alteration, and be paid at point of sale. Those would be things that are necessary to support. Without them, we essentially don't have prime contracting anymore, which is a major impact to our transaction privilege tax locally. Senate Bill 1314 is domestic violence arrest predominant aggressor bill. It's a bill that we supported last year in support of our police department that helps them to be able to use their better judgment in when they make arrests related to a situation like this.
Allison, I actually did have a question on that. Chief Monahan, so he's given his experience when this law came into effect where they had to arrest both parties. Did that hinder the policing of a domestic dispute?
Mayor and Council, the challenge on the dual arrest has more to do with inadvertently arresting a victim who may have used physical violence in defending herself, and it's interpreted as a offense.
Because right now your officer is obligated to arrest both parties.
There are stipulations in the law that allow us to not make a full custody arrest, but usually it's interpreted across the state as mandatory arrest. If there's a present of injury, both parties go to jail.
So you're in support of this, obviously.
The predominant aggressor?
Yes.
Yes, sir. And with permission, we'll have an opportunity to testify in committee on Thursday morning in support of this.
Great. Thank you.
The other bill to support that I wanted to point out is House Bill 2324, Intergovernmental Agreements and Indemnity, which is what would allow us to insert the language that we would prefer into some of the agreements that we have with ADOT when they do a project for us, and to allow us so that they don't indemnify themselves for a project that they completed, essentially. That bill is being carried by Wenninger. I believe it will be seeing committee this week, looking at two different sheets of paper. House Bill 2133, countywide elections, vote by mail, carried by Shope, would allow a county through the vote of the Board of Supervisors to conduct an all-mail election for not just local elections, but local, statewide, and federal elections. Currently, they cannot do that for statewide and federal elections. Obviously, we are a chartered city, so it impacts us differently. We will still be able to carry an all-mail election for our elections that are on the off year and are not consolidated, but if there was something that we wanted to put forward on the consolidated election schedule, right now there would have to be polling places. And then getting to the bad news. For opposition, House Bill 2254, municipal tax exemption residential lease, is being carried by Mitchell. It did make it out of House Ways and Means yesterday on a 5-4 vote of the committee. There were 2 Republicans that voted against that bill. So that is promising as we move forward in the legislative process. However, as Mark pointed out, that is $1.12 million of annual revenue that would be lost to the city of Prescott if we lost the opportunity to maintain our residential rental tax, which is a transaction privilege tax for doing business and renting your property.
Can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Why in the hell do these people care?
They don't.
I mean, why are they putting a bill up there that does not affect what they do, but yet affects our community in a big way?
One thing that I would point out is there are quite a number of legislators that have dual residences and may be impacted by this tax.
Oh, poor thing.
However, I do not know if that is why it has been dropped. The Senate Bill 1079 is the solid waste collection multifamily housing bill that was pointed out during the budget discussion. Multifamily residential represents about 17% of residential revenue for solid waste pickup for the city of Prescott. So the concern there is if you start eroding multifamily residential from the revenue base, then the cost of service would have to increase for all other residential, potentially if we were to lose those accounts to competition. House Bill 2504, Board of Technical Registration alarms. I brought that up last time. That would remove the regulation and certification of alarm business and alarm agents from the board statutes, and it repeals the sections of law that pertain to certification, fingerprinting, and related statutory requirements. The concern there is that without this, they would be moving it to the city, county, city, and town portion of state statute, but we are preempted by state law from requiring those regulations. So we would not be seeing the alarm installers, et cetera, having to go through fingerprinting. These are the people that go into your home to set your alarm who, if they have a nefarious background, you probably would want to know that and not have them working.
I'm trying to get into the heads of the legislator, but wouldn't like Rollie Simmons, couldn't he just demand that he does backgrounds and he could advertise all my technicians are background checked?
That is one of the arguments. However, there are a number of operators in southern Arizona who would prefer not to do that at all.
Okay.
And this is a bill that comes forward essentially every year to erode the alarm regulations. One bill that I had talked about being opposed to was House Bill 2212, Licensing, Accountability, Enforcement, and Exceeding Regulation. The League has successfully been able to reach out to Representative Peterson to amend the bill so that it is not nearly as negative towards cities. It would not require the payment of legal fees to someone who made a claim, et cetera. So it makes it, I put that on my neutral list to monitor to make sure that those amendments do go forward. And then the striker that I mentioned is House Bill 2003. The striker has to do with fire sprinklers, applications, and plans. And so that's going to be in committee tomorrow. My read of the bill is it almost does nothing, but my concern is that by the end of the legislative session, it will seek to preempt cities from being able to enforce the fire code that requires sprinklers for certain types of residential due to their square footage, the ability for the fire department to actually provide proper suppression if there's a very long driveway, et cetera, which was recently re-included in our code when the code updates went forward. So I can't say whether we should be opposed, supportive. I'm saying neutral right now until we have a better understanding of what appears to be a nothing bill will actually do. When things come as strikers, usually that's a concern. So.
Is the House 2590 and Senate 1446, are they identical? Both the TPD reform?
They will be identical, and so that would be considered a consensus bill that would hopefully go quickly through the House and Senate. They would caucus, agree that there weren't changes, and then move to the governor's desk to be enacted with an emergency so that what is currently at conflict for the contractors and for the Department of Revenue could be resolved, because we are currently in limbo.
Okay. On 2563, our bill.
Yes.
Now that there is opposition from at least one segment of the industry to that bill, do you anticipate that we would have an opportunity to have somebody testify when it reaches the appropriate place?
Well, I guess the first step would be that if it reaches the appropriate place, there's never a guarantee of that when you're submitting a bill, especially the first time that it's been submitted. However, I would think that we would want to have testimony available. We're also working on some possible amendments that might make this a little bit more specific and create less concern for some of those groups, but still improve the situation that we're experiencing in Prescott with the lack of balance in our residential neighborhoods that have have seen a huge proliferation of the recovery homes, but also to reach out to the industry and other cities and towns to see if we could address their concerns. More specifically, this is somewhat of a new thing in Arizona, and different cities have been impacted differently based on the growth of the industry, and the types of facilities that are moving into their communities are different. They're all regulated differently. There's state law that addresses it, and about 500 pages of rules created by the agency that implement that state law. So it is not a simple process. Regardless of what happens this session, we will keep trying to move it forward, and even if it doesn't pass this session, this is an opportunity to keep moving it forward, either through continued rules or continued outreach and meetings with other communities and perhaps the industry to find out what might be palatable, or at least to find out what their concerns are so that we can be prepared for them.
The statement of opposition, where does that go?
It appears that it has been sent to the office of Governor Doug Ducey and has copied the House of Representatives.
Okay. Anyone else?
Thank you.
Dana, you have anything?
Beautiful job.
Item 2, boards and commission reports.
I don't have that on my sheet.
Well, that means we're done.
That means we're done. We're adjourned.
That was that. Yeah. That's what the mayor said. Although.